I've been thinking about a series of videos for some time about discrimination and online bullying in World of Warcraft, and to some extent to the wider gaming community. And I was all set to start releasing them, and then the world went crazy. Okay, COVID-19, Black Lives Matter protests took over the world. We were faced with the news about method and wider sexual allegations against figures in the streaming community. And last night we mourned the loss of Rackfall. And I've put off releasing this video repeatedly because these other issues rightly required more attention. But I've come to the realization that there is never going to be a good time to talk about this, and perhaps now is as good a time as any to do so. Now, yesterday, as on many days, I logged into WoW and I flicked on Twitch on my other monitor to watch Asmongold. But things were different. He was up on a soapbox, attacking people using hateful language online and defending himself against allegations that he does the same thing, which he does. Now, I want to be clear that I support Asmongold's efforts to address this issue, and it's nothing but a positive thing that he is using his platform to bring attention to this issue. But he can't really attack other people when he has a character called as Mongoloid. Now, I watched in dismay as Asmongold tried to justify his constant use of the R word because, according to him, it doesn't have the same meaning. And I simply ask Asmongold one question. What gives you, a white, cis, non-disabled male, the right to talk about and dismiss how other communities are affected by the language that you use that is used to target them? And I don't say that with hatred or malice, but seriously, dude, physician, heal thyself. Now, it wasn't too long ago that people were telling the black community that they were too sensitive, or rolling their eyes at women who got a bit uppity, or saying that the LGBTQ community was overreacting. The simple fact of the matter is that language has power. Words are weapons used by those in power to undermine, denigrate, and control people who don't have power. And worse than that, they are used to make people without power complicit in their own treatment. And this is new. This is not a new idea. The worst way that I see this happening is through the use of political correctness. People now aren't poor, they're fiscally challenged. People don't live in slums, they live in informal cities. These political correctness is a way for cowards to hide from the impact of the language that everybody else is using. Now, Asmongold is right. Time does have an impact on the way that words are used, and it does have an impact on the way that people respond to them. But if you are not a part of the community that word targets, you can't stand on a platform saying that that word doesn't have an impact anymore. That's up to the people in the community to decide. It's not up to you. Now, the R word, which is being used now, like the word gay was not too long ago, doesn't have the, to say that doesn't have the impact it used to have. And that an offensive phrase like Mongoloid, doesn't have an impact on disabled people is ignoring the fact that the legislation in the US was changed really recently. 2010 by Obama. And these words are actually rated so offensive that their use is controlled by Ofcom in the UK. That's how offensive these words are. Now, legality aside, you shouldn't need the law to tell you that if your amusement is coming at the cost of someone else's dignity, then you are in the wrong. Yes, time has an impact. I don't know many disabled people who would complain about the use of the word lame, for example. But much as with the word gay before it, retarded is now being used as a catch-all descriptor for something that is bad or something that is wrong. And that in turn says that to anyone who could or would have that word applied to them, that they are also bad and they are also wrong. Now, I get it. Retard is one of the few words in the world that you'll get called out for being offensive, even if you're using it correctly. But the solution then is not to get on a soapbox and say you're using it properly. It's simply not to take the risk and don't use it. Find another word. Now, it could be argued similarly that players who've named their character Mongol are simply expressing pride in their Mongolian heritage. But I think most of us in the WoW community know that they aren't. In the gaming community, on Facebook, on Twitter, Twitch, or even online in Azeroth, language is used as a weapon to create and enforce spaces that are hostile to people who are other to us. Now, being part of that bubble often means using the language of the other people in that bubble. And I'm happy to say that for the most part, the World of Warcraft community is welcoming and tolerant. But just as, and in fact because of the fact that bigotry exists in the real world, it also exists in Azeroth. It's why posts like this are placed on the forums and remain there unchallenged. And FYI, disabled people in wheelchairs are not vehicles or objects of fun, in case you didn't get the memo. If you're the type of person who watched the Black Lives Matter protests and thought it didn't apply to you, then you're wrong. Okay, you're simply wrong. The effects of those protests will hopefully change the fabric of every single society that we all inhabit, Azeroth included. And we all have the power to change the communities we live in for better or for worse. As Mangold chose to name his character with a known disability slur, and because he wasn't punished, others have followed his example. There are now 42 characters in the EU and US named as Mongoloid. There are threads on Reddit, and there are 2 YouTube channels named after it. A simple, unchallenged act of discrimination will always bring about more. Now, a few of my friends, my wife and I, we were talking about this, and we started typing disability slurs into WoW Armory for both the EU and the US. And we found hundreds of characters and about 20 guilds with names that were equally as bad as this. Now, I spoke to the PR team, and eventually I was able to speak to Josh about it, and he asked me to send in the info. So hopefully Blizz will do something about it. But it isn't just on Blizz to challenge this behaviour and this use of language. If you're a type of person who ignores a character at the auction house in Stormwind or Orgrimmar with an offensive name, or you know of a guild with an offensive name and you haven't reported them or asked them to change it, well, you should report it. And you should, if you don't want to deal with them directly, simply report it. And let Blizz work it out. Now, we as a community, we need to do more to say that this kind of behaviour, whether we're talking about racial discrimination, gender, sexual preference, sexual identity, or disability, no discrimination is welcome in our game, and we won't stand for it in our community. In the online world, words are the weapons we use to attack those who are different. And just like in the real world, if people can't use them responsibly, then maybe we need stronger regulation to ensure that they can't be used to inflict harm on others. Now, those are just my thoughts. I'm interested to know what other people think. So, get in touch.